Okay everyone, welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're back on GT Sport and we're back with the FIA Nations race at Autodrome Lagos Major in the RX-7 that got released recently, I think it was, within the last few months. So this is the first FIA race in this car. Not really a combination that would particularly suit myself. However, this actual car I have driven before on daily race at Tsukuba. I did quite enjoy it. You were allowed to do your own setup there, but for this race it was restricted setup, so the car was naturally very drifty. However, we did do a practice race the day before, one practice race very quickly, not really put much effort into this one, and we saw how TRL Adam was driving the car. I studied that when we were live on stream and kind of got the hang of how he was doing it and set a reasonable lap in the time trial session and thought to myself, we might be able to get a solid result here. We'll have to see how it goes, as we're starting from P7 there with that livery created by one of our subscribers on the channel. So starting from P7, we got the chance of a decent result here. Let's see how this goes. So for this race we were back to a standing start at Lagos Major, and as most people know, turn 1 is a very tight left hand that goes into like a chicane complex. So main aim here is to get through turn 1 cleanly, don't wipe anyone out. You can see we're going to try and make sure we don't go into P6 obviously at the start. Now that is one thing I always try and do, is take it easy into turn 1. I know you can make up places, but you can also wreck your race and a lot of other people's race, so taking it fairly easy then just making sure that we get the early apex for here, taking it to the right so we don't get undercut by the driver behind us, and everyone gets through there quite cleanly. It looks like a nice clean start. You can see on the track map no one seems to have been wiped out, so nice to see. Even with the current penalty system, that people are racing fairly clean through there, not much issue. And now you're going to see what I'm talking about with the short shifting. So watch this as we go down the straight. If you're not really used to how to drive this car, shifting around that point there, halfway on the bar that fills up, is the fastest way. However, when you're in 4th gear and you come into the end of the straight, it's better just to accelerate. Don't shift into 5th, because the 5th gear is really weak on this car. So you're best staying in 4th gear and letting the gear rev out. It's same thing for a corner like this. When you're going to be going into an area where you're going to brake, don't shift, because each shift is going to slow you down. So you see revving out at this point and then going into 4th gear just as we approach the apex, because 4th gear will have good torque through here and it will just numb the acceleration a little bit, keep it nice and smooth. And that was one thing I picked up from watching TRL Adam on the video. And also you'll notice that I'm lifting off the throttle on every gear change. It does help the car out ever so slightly on acceleration. Now this race was mainly about tyre wear, trying to look after your tyres. It was a no-stop race. Some people chose to pit, I think, in other races, but it worked out slower. The fastest way to do this race, as we go for a nice little overtake there, putting ourselves up into P6, was to do a no-stop, as we're now behind VQS Will in front of us, and we've got VQS Nick right behind us. So far we're up one place. Let's see what else we can do in this race, trying to make sure that we get some sort of solid race around there. I didn't really expect too many points for this. I just wanted to get a solid race and move on as we're battling away in this race. And so far this has been really clean. You'll see not much dirty driving going on. It's some very clean driving, some great overtakes, a very nice move there by VQS Will there, powering out of that corner with the slides, the rear drifting through there and getting a very nice overtake done as we go to the replay camera, watching all these RX-7s going through the corners and looking absolutely amazing. I enjoy this car in this game. I think they should have 2 separate setups, so maybe a drift one and one that's a bit more suited to road racing. This was very tricky to drive, but once you did get used to it, it was actually not too bad. It was just about maintaining them rear tyres, so short shifting, being on higher gears through the corners, being gentle on the brakes, just generally trying to look after the rear tyres as we go into this really fast flowing section. Just look how amazing this game looks as all them cars going through there, really close racing. This is what we like to see on GT, and it is great to see. Obviously with the current penalty system, things can get a little bit mad, but in this race everyone so far being very respectful, and it's good to see, you know, top split are still keeping it respectful. There is some lunges going on in top split still, but in general it's quite fair. As you see a nice overtake there going on, again space given, no one's got enough, and one thing you could do is try and take an undercut line through there to get a better exit from the corner as we work our way down the straight with the long train of cars behind. Now obviously Slipstream was on a very high second. You'll see that I picked up a half-second penalty. That was for a corner cut going through the fast flowing section. We slightly ran wide on one of the corners, and it didn't really gain us anything. As you can see, we're still behind Nick, but we picked up a half-second penalty, and we're going to actually, that is probably going to drop us down now to P7. So unfortunately that place that we've made up so far in this race, we're going to lose that place and be dropped down to P7. I don't think we'll lose anything else, because half a second penalty on this game Where it is with this car, it's probably, like I say, going to lose us maybe 7 tenths to a second maximum. As you can see, we take that penalty back on the throttle, and you can see we're going to lose about 7 tenths to something like that. We're not going to lose a full second, I don't even think, as we now tuck in behind VQS Nick, and we're not going to panic. It was a bit frustrating because I think without that we would have been right behind Nick and would have been able to obviously keep them tyres in good condition and make even more progress. But let's see what we can do now that we're behind the black RX-7 in front of us. See if we can make any progress, follow him through here, see different lines that we were taking through here. I was trying to follow the lines that TRL Adam was doing, as we got a little bit sideways on that really fast corner there, which is one thing you have to be careful of, obviously looking after the rear tyres. But yeah, I was taking quite different lines to some people, and I think it was helping out on my rear tyres. As we skip forward now to lap 5, it was fairly static for a few laps. Obviously the slipstream drain that is Gran Turismo at the moment with the current system they're using for the draft does generate that kind of racing. However, now we're coming into the stage where tyre wear is starting to take place. You can see on the telemetry the tyre wear is fairly equal on my car. I had actually decided to move my bias to -3 around about this point, and I think it really did help with the performance of the car. I had been running -5 for the first laps, and it just felt like it was understeering. It wasn't rotating too much, but the one thing that would have gave me was a little bit of maybe 3 or 4 laps of preventing the rear tyres wearing out quite so much. And now we can go to -3 and we can start pushing with that, you know, while we're still conserving tyres, as we see a lot of battling going on up here. We can see Nick go around the outside of Will, trying to get that better wide line. That line does work if you can get on the power nice and early. You see, I haven't really made that work. However, now we did have an advantage coming out of the corner, but Nick obviously tucked into the slipstream of VQS Will. Will we be able to go for a move into the braking zone? He covers that off. I'm going to go back to the right hand side, try and work him side to side. That is one thing you want to try and do in these cars. Try and work people from left to right to left to right, to see if you can find the way past somewhere by just getting a better exit than them as we go through this really technical section here. This was really, you had to be very cautious on this left-hander that you didn't get the car drifting, which would absolutely wipe out the rear tyre. So you can see again, braking nice and early for this right-hand corner. Very important to get on the brakes nice and early so you can get the exit out of here and work your way down into this very tricky braking zone. Again, this was a zone where if you brake a fraction late, you could easily run off down the left-hand side and get totally took out by that curb. It was so easy to do. I've seen so many people do it in different classes of cars, but luckily so far no one seems to be getting caught out of this. We got 2 cars going side by side ahead of Nick there. You can see VQS Wheel going side by side for there. Some more great racing going on. This is what we like to see on Gran Turismo Sport, and this is why we play Gran Turismo Sport. Even with the penalty system not in the best condition at the moment, people in the top split are still racing fairly clean. Now there is some issues going on in some races. It's bound to happen. It used to happen when we had the penalty system, but in general there is still respect amongst the top split drivers, and this is really nice to see as we go into the braking zone again, trying to make sure we don't hit the rear of Nick as Wheel goes very wide for them, maybe trying to get an overtake done on P4, but actually compromises his line, but gets a really nice exit from the corner. However, we're going to try and pick that slipstream up for a bit, see if we can go for a move into turn 1. He's going to defend, Nick is going to defend into turn 1. We're going to try and go around the outside, squeeze us a bit there, just about gave us enough space, and then into the braking zone, trying to make sure that we do not run wide. This is great racing. This is what we all want to see on Gran Turismo Sport. Cars battling for position, nice close racing. And as much as when I first saw this combination, I was a bit like, not too keen on it. I have to say, I thoroughly enjoyed this race. This was some of the best racing that I've had on Gran Turismo in quite a long time. Really enjoyed this race. The cars, very difficult to drive, probably helped make the racing quite close because they were very difficult to push. You've got obviously Williams Adam out there on the front on his own, not battling, able to pull out quite a big gap already. You can see halfway through this race, and I think he's got that gap quite significantly up there. So yeah, he's well away. He's got this race pretty much won from there. As you can see, he's obviously over 7 seconds in the lead, so not really a chance of getting the win. However, we have got Calster there, not too far up ahead. You can see that Calster and I think Calster and P3 at the moment are battling not too far in the distance. There is a bit of a gap. We're not in the slipstream, so this will be interesting. Will we be able to show some pace in this car? Now, these type of cars in general, the N-Class cars, are not my strongest type of car in the game. However, I am trying to learn by what we did on live stream when we were watching TRL Adam, trying to get some tips and seeing if we can figure stuff out as we go into Apex. A little tap on the rear of Nick there, no harm done. He gets out the corner well. I think it was just a combination of all 4 cars. As you see, more than 4 cars now, 6 cars almost in this train of cars battling for this position for the outside the podium positions of P4. But you can see P3 and P2 are not too far in the distance. There is still opportunities in this race as we see Nick go for a move on Marcus there, gets up the inside, makes a move. I'm going to take advantage of that as well. Go up the inside on the power nice and early, give Marcus some space on the left hand side, and we're going to try and hang it around the outside here, which is not easy to do. You can see the car almost drifting through the corner. Now we've got to get on the brakes nice and early so we hit the apex, doing that extremely well there. Almost drifting through the corner, giving space, and the car behind goes for a move on Marcus as well. Gets that move. So Marcus loses 3 places in the space of just a few corners, so not a very good quarter of a lap for Marcus there as we go into that tricky braking zone. Nick getting very close with the rear tyres to getting absolutely sucked off by the curb there. You saw the rear tyres getting inches away there as the car almost drifted into that braking zone. So being very lucky there not to get wiped out as we go through this section again into that 4th gear nice and early. Really was helping out for you. You can see the lines that we're taking, trying to look after the rear tyres, trying to avoid the drifting of the car. That is what you want to do, trying to avoid the rear sliding too much. You can see obviously Williams Adam there still increasing that lead, but with the battling that's going on, that is not surprising. But the great thing is here you can see that Calster and P3 seem to be getting a little bit closer, and I started to feel like I was getting used to this car. The more and more we were driving it, I felt like the pace was getting there. As we're going to try and go down the right hand side, can we hang this down the right hand side? Will is going to give the slipstream to his fellow teammate there. You can see trying to hold us off there. 100% understand why he did that, and then going back over to the racing line. Nick goes in quite deep there though. Is he going to miss the braking zone? He manages to slow it down just in time and takes that very tight apex. We're going to try and see if we can find a way past Nick here. You can see I really wanted to get past, and this really does show you, if only we hadn't had that penalty, where could we be? Could we have already been past Will? I don't know. We would have been definitely in a position to be pushing on for that P4 at least, but these things happen as we now come out the corners. Nick goes very wide there, almost getting all 4 wheels off of the racing line, which would have gave him 30 tyres, but just about kept his right hand tyres on that curb, so that avoids picking up too much dirt on them tyres and gives him the grip into the braking zone that he needs. As we then get on the power nice and early, we've now got P7 coming back at us. He obviously lost out on 3 positions in one corner, pretty much 2 or 3 corners, sorry, and now he obviously wants to make up some places back in this race. As we look in that bottom left corner, you can see just how close this racing is. Really enjoyable. It's almost bumped front of the car, almost right on the rear bumper of Nick there through there. Had to back off. He actually got a corner cut penalty through there. He took a little bit too much off the racing line, and also Will making a mistake there. We might be able to go for a move up the inside here now and get a position off of Will. He's going to try and narrow the apex. We're going to brake late, but then try and hold a very tight apex. Very tricky to do in this car. Managed to pull it off quite nicely, and then accelerated out in 2nd gear this time. You see I use 2nd gear a little bit more than what I would normally to try and give myself a little bit of acceleration to get into the slipstream of P4. So now up into P5 in this race. So a few good overtakes so far, and now we can see that P2 and P3 are battling, and this is good. They're battling away, they're losing time, and it's just going to enable us to get closer to that slipstream for the final podium position maybe in this race, as Nick there's almost losing the rear again, really getting aggressive on them rear tyres. And that, the way his car was behaving, was kind of giving me a bit of motivation, because maybe he's used a little bit more rear tyres up than myself, and also he's going to be taking a penalty now, so we should be able to jump ourselves up into P4 here. Let's take a look. He takes a penalty. We're going to go speeding past, so it's equaled out now on the penalties in terms of he's had a half second, I've had a half second, and we get that position back in the same way that we lost a position. And now we can concentrate on trying to close this gap down to the cars battling up ahead. You can see that I think they look like they might be starting to struggle on tyre wear. It's possible they're having issues with tyre wear at this stage of the race. It was fairly easy to, the car just wanted to start drifting around now, but my tyres are actually feeling very nice at this point. A lot of grip, no real worries about the rear. The rear will go a little bit temperamental, but because we had obviously got the way to drive this pretty much sorted by watching TRL Adam, you can see the car is behaving very well, and we've actually managed to get ourselves into the slipstream of Calster in front of us there through that section. Maybe they've battled a bit too much there, didn't get the momentum through the winding section, and now we go over onto the start straight, And you see, just losing a bit of the slipstream, however, getting a very nice exit off the corner, and that's going to give me the slipstream back. So again, we're back in that slipstream, and now we can push on for this final podium position in this race. So obviously, coming from P7, we're now up to P4. We've made solid progress in this race, and things were starting to look good. I was actually starting to get in the zone a bit, starting to enjoy driving the car. I was pushing, I was zoning out a bit. I do tend to do that. When I zone out, I drive quite well. You know, totally zoning out of the stream chat. I do know that obviously you're streaming at the same point, you want to be talking to people, but in this situation in FIA, I like to just zone out, concentrate on my driving, and when I do this and I get 100% into the FIA mode, as I call it, I do tend to drive a lot better, as you can see. Skipping on to a lap further down, onto lap 12. We've now just got about 2.5 laps left. We're right behind Calster now. You can see we've made solid progress on that lap there, putting ourselves right in the slipstream with Calster, and also we got P2 not too far in the distance. This is a possible podium in this race. All we have to do now is just pretty much make sure that we keep it calm, make sure that we keep looking after them rear tyres, because we're going to need them when we come to having to do an overtake as we go through this really fast winding section. You can see, trying to keep it smooth here, because I know where the opportunities are to overtake on this track. It's either into the final corner or turn 1. They are the main areas where you can get an overtake on. Not really close enough to go for a dive. You can see we're 3 tenths back. That's too far to really go for a dive up the inside. So just keeping it on the normal racing line and trying to get a solid exit from this corner. So early up to 3rd gear to try and give ourselves that traction. Ran fractionally wide there onto the curb, so a frustrating moment there, losing the vital 10th or so going down into turn 1. So again, we're not going to be able to go for a move on this lap into turn 1, unfortunately, but we've still got more opportunities in this race to overtake. We've got a couple of 2 laps to go now. There's still, I'm sure there's going to be an opportunity to try and fight ourselves into P3. So through this section, trying to get on the power aggressively now. Now this is the point where you start not really worrying about the tyres. We've saved a lot of tyres. We've still got grip there, so we're going to push pretty much 100% at this stage as P2 driving nice and smoothly up there at the moment. He's got a bit of a gap now that obviously Calster is under pressure. That's pretty much left P2 off the hook there. He's now able to concentrate on his lines, so he's actually giving Calster a nice slipstream. There's a nice enough gap there for Calster to get that toe as Calster goes a little bit sliding through there. We're trying to keep the sliding limited really to try and keep the traction on the rear of the car as we come through to the really fast flowing section. Again, this was probably one of the trickiest sections on this track in these cars, because with the rotation changes and with it being a drift car, it wanted to slide. As you see, Calster getting all kinds of out of shape there, but luckily making it work and actually getting quite a good exit speed from that corner. You see again, Calster's car drifting through there. Looks absolutely amazing when these cars are sliding. Really enjoyable cars to drive. They do want to drift. That is how they are meant to be driven. But unfortunately in this race you had to try and limit that as we now come to the final corner, trying to get a very solid exit. You saw me take a very wide line through that corner, tried to give myself really good exit speed, and we've managed to get the perfect exit there as we now accelerate down into turn 1. You can see that gap is now down to a 10th. This is a perfect opportunity to maybe go for a move. You see, down to a 10th into the braking zone. We're going to brake a little bit later, come off the brakes, down into 2nd gear. Normally we'd do that in 3rd gear, but I needed to give him space on the outside. Managed to make that move, and we're up into P3. However, he's now got the inside. Will he be able to accelerate out? Doesn't seem to have the traction on the rear tyres. And now we've got 1 lap to see if we can get ourselves up into P2. A really nice move for the podium position there. But will this be too much of a struggle to get ourselves into P2? It's looking very unlikely. He's got a 2nd lead. We're going to keep pushing though. I wasn't going to give up on this race. You can see we've actually only lost out. I think we've actually gained a little bit on Williams Adams since we've been coming through the field. So I think my pace was actually pretty solid round here. I don't think it was obviously as fast as Williams Adam on that first stint. But I think if we would have started right at the front, we might have been able to stay in his slipstream and keep with him right to the end. I think it would have been possible with the strength of the slipstream on GT Sport. He definitely had more pace than me. But it's good to see that my pace isn't terrible in this type of car, especially at this track. This track is not one of my stronger tracks. It's probably one of my weaker tracks. So things seem to be working out quite well for me so far in this race as we come through to the final corners of the race. You can see we've managed to gain 3 tenths on P2, but that's not enough. That's some of that is pretty much just down to acceleration zones with the slipstream as we come into the final corner. Trying to see if we can get a good solid exit, but not much we can do now. It's just a drag race to the finishing line, and we're going to come home in P3 as Calster behind there, nearly losing the rear of his car, getting things all sideways, and now he's just drifting his way down to the finishing line as we come home in P3 in this race. Thoroughly happy with that. Hope you enjoyed this video. I'm sure you did with the overtaking and the quality of the racing. It was very high quality of racing in that race. No one really taking anyone out. A lot of respect given, and I thoroughly enjoyed that race. It was really entertaining. So make sure you hit that like button if you did enjoy that race. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already subscribed, and make sure you hit that notification button so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks again for watching, everyone.